All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our preview and model portion of our lesson. So first, I want to introduce you guys to the article that I'm going to be using to practice writing a summary with you, okay? And so we're not actually going to read this entire article, but what I'm going to go over with you right now is going to give you a better understanding about what it's about. So I'm going to need to know what the topic of this text is, and I'm going to be using the text features, which I can see the title and the picture, to figure out what the topic and what this text is about. So I can see that the title states, as the U.S. grew, the North-South dispute over slavery led to the Civil War. And I can see what I think are presidential candidates ripping apart a map of the country. So I know this text will teach me about the dispute between the North and the South about slavery that led up to the Civil War. This text feature connects to this topic because it shows that the presidents and vice presidents tore apart the country because they had different beliefs about slavery. So I'm hoping that this will help you out when we are diving a little bit deeper into each section and writing summaries about them. So let's go ahead and get started. What you're going to see us do together right now is annotate a part of the text for the 5 W's and H. We're also going to be determining what the text structure of this section is because this is going to play a big part in writing a summary. Let's go ahead and get started. So, we are going to read the section called Long Road to the Civil War. Always carefully read the subheading to determine the topic. I see here this section is about the long road to the Civil War. That's not an actual road. That means what led up to the Civil War. Listen as I read the first paragraph. Lincoln's words turned out to be true. Only a few years later, the North and South entered the Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865. The bloody contest ultimately brought an end to slavery. I see there are two possible who's in this paragraph, Lincoln and the North and the South. This section isn't mostly about Lincoln. It's about what led up to the war. So I think the North and the South is the who. I also see some dates. I was tempted to say that that's our win, but those are the dates that the Civil War occurred, not what led to it. Did you see how I went back to the subheading to check my thinking about the 5 W and H annotation? What about this long road to the war do we learn in the second paragraph? Listen as I read. The years leading up to the war are known as antebellum. For most of this period, the North and South were able to avoid direct conflicts. Slavery was only legal in the South, but whites in both parts of the country shared a belief in the superiority of white people. They also shared a reluctance to talk about whether slavery was morally acceptable. In the first sentence, we learned our win. The long road to the war, the text says the years leading up to it, and what the period leading up to the war was called antebellum. So we have already learned our when and our what. We also learned the why. There wasn't a conflict. We learned why there wasn't a conflict. Well, that was because the North believed whites were superior and didn't like talking about slavery. We didn't find a how detail and already know the where, which is in the North and the South. Before we write our own summary, we also need to identify the text structure of the section. The second paragraph explains why there were so many years leading up to the Civil War. The cause was both the North and South believed that whites were superior and did not want to talk about slavery. The effect was that there were many years of slavery before the war started. I want you to take a moment to read my summary. I want you to look at my summary and find who this section was mostly about and what topic this section was mostly about. Again, the subheading and pop-out sentences have these. Next, I want you to think what the author most wanted us to know about the most important people and topics. I did this in my own words. Why was there such a long period before the Civil War? Well, I know after reading that they disagreed about slavery, but they benefited from it nonetheless and believed they were superior. I also want to know why, how, when, and where. The information is from each section. Sometimes the same piece of text answers both. So, as you can see, my summary follows this criteria for success. You can see that I've identified who or what the topic of the section was mostly about, which is the antebellum period, the period before the Civil War. I explained what the author most wanted me to know about this, which was that there was a disagreement between the North and South about slavery. I also used the same text structure that there was in the section, which was cause and effect. Don't mind this is a typo. It should say cause and effect. And I've also answered the why, how, when, and where, right? Where was the North and the South? How is it there was a disagreement and they felt like they were superior, right? When was the period before the Civil War? The how and the why kind of go together. So, you are now going to do this on your own, and later on you will be able to check your work. You are going to read this section, Slavery Grows, Some Whites Get Rich. You are going to annotate for the 5 W's and H in this text, and I also want you to be able to identify the text structure. I will be giving you the text structure throughout this lesson, but it's good practice to think about what the text structure is. I'm going to go ahead and have you read this, and then you are going to practice writing a summary. Then I'm going to show you what the answer is, and you can compare your answers to mine.